Okay, thank you very much. So yes, we are videotaping, and so have you asked for their consent? So if you don't want to be videotaped, stand behind the camera and don't ask questions. Sorry. It's for the South Pasadena. So they very kindly have offered to videotape this because a number of people cannot make it today, and they really wanted to hear this discussion. So now I will bring up Delane Shane.
And then I'm gonna, hi everybody, I'm Bianca. I'm gonna try to keep everybody, thank you Mary, I'm gonna try to keep everybody on topic. And if I start moving up here, then you know you gotta shut up.
Would you like me to
Before I introduce myself, I want to say a shout out to Linus's mom. We also live on Meridian, and our dear neighbor was one of the two of the accidents.
Right, that's where
So I'm not starting the talk yet. I'm just addressing one of our neighbors. As I said, Linus's mom. I'm Sarah's mom. Okay, if you appreciate that introduction. I guess I have to be like.
Delane, you're going to need to be louder because the microphone's not very loud. So I think she's going to try to adjust the volume.
Alrighty. I have a lot of papers here.
There he goes.
I was just doing what we do in this community, saying hello to our mothers and fathers. Sometimes we lose our own identity.
Did it get stopped? Okay. Cornelia, you need to pass on, keep passing.
I can always use
Oh,
my
is that it?
space.
There was no more? Okay.
If you don't mind.
Okay, take one.
So, and I also sympathize with Fremont Avenue. Again, I haven't started my presentation, but it's why we're all here. Because of our community concerns and because we love South Pasadena.
Are there any extras?
No, it's okay. You're good.
There's.
You can, yeah. Okay.
We can share it too. Does anybody need one to share?
I have one extra one. Yes.
You guys share there. Yeah. Yeah.
So good morning. Happy New Year. And I very much appreciate this opportunity to share with you my observations. I appreciate Betty and Bianca's hard work and all the WISPPA board members and all of our membership, and I am proud to be a WISPPA member. This has been an interesting journey for me to read 152 pages of the general plan update and 26 pages of a matrix filled with action items of what the city wants to do in the next 20 years. And I am not an expert in this. I'm not, as Betty said, representing WISPPA, nor am I representing the city. So this is really an opportunity for my voice, but I'm hoping that this will generate more of your voices in the time that comes. I appreciate my family, my husband Russ and my daughter Sarah, for being my sounding boards and listening to me and just giving me some advice for my presentation and also just plowing through this. And I also appreciate many of my friends here that have helped me offline to try to focus my presentation. So the focus of this is very, very limited. I couldn't get through all of it in this presentation. It's physically impossible. And I'm not an expert. My background is 37 years as a environmental planning professional, so I was one of those individuals that prepare environmental impact reports. I'm now retired. It's been a year. We've moved from the San Fernando Valley back in 2008. We first lived on El Centro, and now we live on Meridian. And we feel very blessed and very grateful to be here. I also want to point out that I never got a chance to review the downtown specific plan. So if you have a chance by next week, at least thumb through it. Your voices are very, very important to the city. This is a mammoth undertaking. I also want to say about myself that I tend to be a person that's not a risk taker. I tend to be conservative, and I'm not talking about politics. It's just I like to have more information to become familiar with it, even if I'm not an expert, but so that I can at least have a dialogue, at least speak my piece and hear what you have to say and understand where you're coming from. So I'm not an expert in all this, but I've tried to digest as much as I can. And so there's a lot of good things in this document. I don't want to in any way minimize that. But for the next 40 minutes or so, or less really, I'm going to be sounding like a Debbie Downer, you know. I'm going to be taking things where I don't understand, I can't connect the dots, and I appreciate Betty and Bianca saying about a question and answer, but I have a lot of questions and I don't necessarily have the answers. So I'm not anti-development. It's time. We do need to develop our city, to grow our city. And I'm also not anti-creative, but know that this city is really South Pasadenans. We are creative and we're also non-creative. There are so many educators, attorneys, bookkeepers, real estate people, retired people, and we all comprise South Pasadena. So very briefly, I've got that handout that WISPPA was kind enough to copy, and I'm going to follow it as best I can, but I'm also looking at the time, and time is rushing past. So some of you know, because you've been here for so many years, that the general plan is a reoccurring process. It's a legally binding document that helps direct where a city or county is going to grow and develop physically. It's a state law requiring general plans. All counties and all cities must have that in the state of California. And the substance of it, the preparation and the processing is in the California Government Code, as well as regulations and guidelines to tell the city and the counties how to direct that process is in the California Code of Regulations. And even to make it more complicated, you can imagine this very controversial process that a lot of people don't agree with or have very mixed opinions about. There's always lawsuits. So legal cases and precedences are set that come back and tell the cities and counties also how they have to prepare and process. And then even some cities have their own handbooks. So it's all a lot of different information that we turn to our city planners that we count on. And so we have our new director, Joana Hancomer, and of course she's only been here for a few months. And any time that I have emailed her or talked to her, she has been very helpful. So I'm one of the people that certainly wants to give her a chance. The only downside is she is our third planning director since 2017. So you lose a lot of institutional memory and progress and direction. You know, there was David Watkins, David Bergman, and now Joana. So some people really don't understand the strength and the power of the general plan, but remember that any kind of action that the city council takes, it always comes back to, if it has to do with growing our city, developing our city, the adopted general plan is what the city council and the attorney and the planners will turn to. And the question will be, is this action for this new development, this new house, two-story addition, is it consistent with the general plan update and the zoning regulations and the development code? General plan is very, very important to every aspect, and yet most of us will not really look it through. We will count on our city staff and our officials to make sure that it's carried out. It's got a shelf life, this one. If it's adopted as planned in 2020, it will be a full 20 years. That's a whole new generation of those children that will be born this year, that they'll grow up in adulthood with this general plan amendment or update. And it is so important that we get it right, or at least develop a consensus of what we want. The specific plan is a subset of that general plan. It's its own document, follows the same procedures, and it's focused on a particular geographic area. So I plowed through the 152 pages of the general plan update. It's broken up into 3 parts. First part is introduction and vision. Second part, policy, goals, policies, and actions. That's really the meat of it. And then a very important third part, implementation, how we're going to carry out the goals, policies, and actions within the general plan. That was not available. Neither is it available for the specific plan. But, again, to the credit of Joana, she did post, and it is posted on the city's website, and all you have to do is South Pasadena Implementation Matrix in Google, and it'll take you to that top line, the link to the city's website, where the city lays out everything that's going on now with the updates. So go back to it frequently because it updates. And so as you scroll down on that website, there's these 4 large tables, and they're comparison tables with what happened in 2017 versus what has happened now in 2019. There's 4, 2 for the specific plan, 2 for the general plan. The table number 3, the third one down, is the one that I printed out, and it looks like this. There's 26 pages, and it's tabular Thorne, and I know you can't see the details, but you can at least see that it is a table. And I went through it. It says from which chapter of the general plan it's related to, what the action number is, what the description is, the time frame, who's going to implement it, the cost. It's like a restaurant, $1 sign up to $4 signs. And then where the funding is coming from and what the changes are between 2017 and 2019. I did not look at the comparison of what happened. I just felt like there was so much to absorb here that whatever changes, whatever we first set out in 2017, somebody else, I hope, has looked at the difference between that time and today. So, in part 2 of the general plan, there is 8 chapters, and they each reflect the goals, and they're called Our Natural Community, Our Prosperous Community, Our Well-Planned Community, Our Accessible Community, Our Healthy Community, Our Safe Community, Our Active Community, and Our Creative Community. And each one has a purpose. Some are optional and some are required by state law. So you can imagine land use, traffic circulation, safety, public health, conservation, and open space. But this is the way it's done now with our community. I felt that for today, I'm only going to focus on one goal, and I'm not even going to focus on any of the policies. I'm going to go straight to the actions. And that goal is going to be economic development, because that seems to be the main driver of the focus on the general plan. And you might say, well, there's housing and there's all these other things. Of course there is. But I thought for discussion here to share with you, I would take the time on our prosperous community. Now, each of these chapters are divvied up into goals, policies, and action items. And so the goals, they help to accomplish the city's growth in the next 20 years. So these goals are very broad in scope and long range, up to 20 years. So they're very wonderful, very broad statements. Then you start zeroing down to policies, which can be principles, rules, guidelines, describing how the city will attain those goals. And then the actual measured steps, the pedal to the metal, where the city is going to commit to doing things on specific time frames and with the resources and the help and the guidance. There's lots of factors why some actions will not be processed in a given time. So I'm going to just focus on our prosperous community and some of the action items that I've seen in that chapter, but also in other chapters. Really, other important things are affordability. I've got a couple of comments on transportation, but I'm going to focus on this. And just sort of as a sidelight to what Betty had said about the process itself, it was exciting to begin this new journey, this new, a journey to begin the general plan update in 2017. And I recognize so many of your faces that was sitting with me or across from me or attending other workshops on starting up the general plan. I was on the natural resources focus group and the core group, and there were other groups. I did not see all of these groups. I was working and I didn't attend all of them. So we heard a lot of voices, apparently 1,000 of us, which is really excellent for a small town to participate in the charrettes and the workshops, the surveys. And that's what you call bottom-up planning, voicing from the community and letting our planners and our officials know how we feel about this city. And then suddenly, it's shut down after January 2018. It didn't really come back, at least in the public area, until November, approximately 2019. So we lost a lot of valuable time. I don't know why it happened. But if I had had access to the full draft in 2017, which I didn't have, maybe some of you did, but I never saw that earlier version with the original consultants, maybe I would have, been one of those voices that say, some of this doesn't quite make sense to me. Some of this seems to be going in a direction that maybe we should talk about. Again, come back as a group and really see. Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's the way it should be, but I would like to be brought on board and understood and understand these things better. But that didn't happen. And I'm not clear as to what some of the commissions. We've got fabulous commissioners who unstintingly give their time to read all the materials and to help us also grow our city at a more micro view. And I didn't really see too much at commission meetings over these past years what their input has been and how much they've contributed to the shaping of what we're reviewing now. I don't know. I'm just leaving it for you. And if it's important to you, it might be something that you might want to ask the city. Because we lost a year and a half when we could have squared away a lot of things, and now we have to rush. And you're asking me to give you some information when there's just so much to digest that it can't possibly be done in one time. So what we know is at the end of the day, with the 20 years, what they're projecting is that there will be, in certain areas of infill where there's gaps or there's space and not in the existing residential areas, are roughly 500 units of residential units to be built. In non-residential, we're talking about 130,000 square feet for retail and 300,000 square feet for office space. And if you're like in Los Angeles or San Francisco, that's pretty nothing. But here, even though it's maybe just a few buildings, you will see the difference as you walk along Mission or Fair Oaks. The plan is focused at the ostrich farm, which could definitely use more infill building, Mission Street and Fair Oaks Avenue. And then they have identified these neighborhood centers, Huntington Drive and Garfield Avenue, Huntington Drive and Fletcher, and closest to me, and Linus's mom, Huntington Drive and Fremont Avenue. So, and in that area, they're looking at 50 units of new housing. Though it's a little bit misleading to say, though, that there's no changes in the existing, because I know City Council has now approved accessory dwelling units, the granny flats, and additional units for people to live in, and that will be in our existing residential areas. So that'll affect how many people are living in each parcel. That'll be an increase, but I want to stay focused, and I want to go over the city's goals. This is for economic redevelopment, and I know you can't see it, this is just for me to read to you. But it says, attract and retain high-value, high-wage jobs within the creative sector, diversify the local economy, promote and support local businesses, and build the city's fiscal capacity to create and sustain public amenities and services while maintaining South Pasadena's small town character and quality of life. I want to bring out 3 points from my perspective. All of this is for economic development while maintaining South Pasadena's small town character. While means at the same time, for those of you that are English majors, that's the connection. But the way I look at it, and as a legal document, and this is just my opinion, you can disagree, and I'm not going to be at all put out by that. But what I feel the message is that it's development. Come on, come in, help us grow our city. And while we have South Pasadena here, South Pasadenans, you're going to have to adjust to that growth and change and be a part of that. And that's one way of looking at it. Here's how I look at it from my perspective. So each of you have made a decision to be here, and I don't mean physically here, but here in South Pasadena. And if we went over with each of you, you'd have your own reasons for coming here. Some of you were born here. Some of you are multi-generational. Some of you have been here maybe just for a few months, a year. We've been here since 2008. But I bet you the one defining feature that all of us have in common is what I have been struggling to find a word for, but we use the code. And it's said here, in planarese, small town character and quality of life. But it's really, that's the heart of it, the heart of the community. It's a nice community. It's a small town, Mayberry RFD. But, I don't want to take that mythology too far because we're diversified and men and women both participate. It's not just something from the 1950s or 60s, you know. We're not all white. We bring with us all strengths, and we have all backgrounds, and some of us may have only graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. Some of us may be PhDs and MDs, but we each have value, and we turn to each other, and we believe this, and it's a feeling that you cannot write on a piece of paper. It's niceness. It's knowing who your kids are friends with, or maybe not friends with. It's kids who you see are in trouble. Where are you? Do you need a lift home? That you're not a stranger. You see the kids that our daughter used to do, running around on those roots of the library tree, and skipping around, and the balloon for 4th of July. We all buy into that, even though that image may be now somewhat frayed. But people really want to come here. We're a small town. We should guard it religiously, or if you don't believe in religiously, for a branding purpose. We care about it, but it's also something that we can offer up. It's so special. So why are we putting it down here? Is one thing. The second thing is, we're putting up here the creative sector. Why are we putting our eggs in one basket? From an economic standpoint. We are, as the real estate people say, location, location, location. Oh my God, what's happening around us is so much technology, besides the creative, and creative, we are so blessed with the local creatives who give so much. And creatives is anything you can think of, the writers, the poets, the architects, the designers, and now we're getting into gaming and advertising and music and the whole gamut, the sculptures, the glass, the stained glass window people. So much is out there already, and I get that, and if we can draw more in, fine. But I ask you, when that happens, sometimes local creatives also get displaced by high-end creatives. You know, look at what happened, you know, with Venice Beach. You know, people like Linda Ronstadt, before they were famous, they'd hang out there. And now the property values out there are sky high. Think of Greenwich Village, Soho, when you have the beatnik generation and all that poetry of that era. And now those properties are sky high again. So will the creative sectors, the new and upcoming design companies that will really want to relocate to our brand new developments, will they have opportunities for our local and creatives? And I don't know. But I look and I say, well, what about the others, those of us that aren't? Well, we have a place too. And unfortunately, as we develop all these nice upscale shops, and we need the salespeople, and we need more baristas, and we need more cleaning people, and whatnot, will they be able to still live? Oh my gosh, okay, I have to go much faster. So the bottom line is, do we want to just limit it? There's STEM research, we've got the universities around us. Over in East LA, they have biotechnology, and a whole lot of life science hub businesses. We should be out there diversifying. It's much better and safer and less of a risk. And finally, some of our amenities. We have infrastructure that's aging in so many ways, and our city council is grappling with how to fix it up. But in some of the action items that are presented, like modernizing our whole water-wise system, is going to require a lot of money to bring it all up for all of us. And the problem is that I found in our general plan is that a lot of the modernization will be mapped out somewhere in the midterm, in 8 months, 8 years from now, 8 to 10 years. It says midterm, whatever that means. But meanwhile, we are patching along and trying to pay as we go. As you have more and more development, on one page of the general plan, it says it's not going to exert any problems with our existing infrastructure because it's small developments over time. But on the other page, it says we already have, for example, low pressure, water pressure, getting the water out to the faucets, to the showers. And it requires that all of us have to improve that system to make the water pressure able to go up 2 or 3 stories for those new developments. They themselves will probably have to have on-site pumps to pump up the water. And we'll need more water supplies, possibly from MWD and other areas. Yet, we are having one of the implementation action items is to immediately start with the specific plan. But our aging infrastructure has got to limp along, and we don't know yet what the cost is to upgrade it until many years later when we already have lots of development. So we may be looking at a huge bill at the end of the line instead of knowing up front how much right now do we have to spend on without development, and how much really can our new development take before our water lines, our sewer lines, our storm drains are in trouble. And there's a gap there that I don't understand. So with this gestalt, what I've suggested, and this is just a suggestion, is putting our image first, because that's what everybody wants. That's an economic engine right there. And also make it more equitable for all of us, and not just one particular sector, although I am not minimizing it, and certainly something like this can be a policy statement, and is already. But what I'm suggesting is encourage, and it's written on your handout, encourage a healthy, livable, and equitable environment that supports and preserves South Pasadena's unique character and quality of life through thoughtful planning and smart growth with a strong and diverse economy, while ensuring that community services and infrastructure are sufficient to accommodate the growth. It makes sense to guard our views. And so what does that mean? That means to developers, to consultants, to corporations that come knocking on our door. They know in the front, we are a small town, we have lots of opportunities, great location, but you need to design something that won't disrupt us, that will blend in, so that we can absorb you and make you part of our community too. We all started from 2008, we're outsiders, right? Now I feel like we are part of our community. So why not put our brand, our gestalt, our feeling, however you want to look at it, front and center, and say, from there, developers, you take it as it comes, and it fits in there. So in doing this, then we protect the way of life we cherish, we broaden economic and housing opportunities for all residents and stakeholders, we foster sensitive growth with strategic investment in our infrastructure and services, and we establish priorities to implement the general plan update. I've got a lot more, and I'm running out of time, but I do want to hit that there's a couple of action items in this matrix that talk about moving traffic in terms of capacity and in terms of at the intersection. So I'm against that, and the reason why I hope you will be against that is because starting in 2017, we had the opportunity as our traffic consultant, Nelson and Nygaard. And one of the traffic engineers that I spoke to in 2017 was Steve Bolin. And when I started talking about Meridian and Fremont to him, and I said, yeah, you know, Meridian is identified as a collector street, which is supposed to handle 3,000 to 6,000 cars a day. I said, already in a 2014 traffic study, there were 7,500 cars identified each day, and that was 2014. And by the way, there's a left turn slot on Monterey that directs more traffic from Monterey going west off of Fremont down to my street. And we don't have any stop signs directly on Meridian, so it's, you know, speedway time. And yeah, we see accidents all the time. It's a fatality, not only sadly that happened on Fremont, it's going to happen in Meridian. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when. So I said that to him, to Steve Bolin. I said, you know, we're like a mini arterial. And he said, stop. He said, you know, that's a thing of the past. He said, what now the traffic engineers are looking for is complete streets. And looking not only at car throughput, but also looking at what the community wants, what the system is, putting in many, many factors, and not just how many cars go through. It's about the pedestrian, it's about the bicyclists, and it's a whole holistic kind of thing. And I'm not really an expert, but lo and behold, while we were using their services, a practitioner's handbook was developed by Nelson Nygaard, and Steve is one of the authors, and it was sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration. And it talks about these different measures, and it does away with arterials, collectors, and whatnot. And it offers us ways to deal with traffic calming and traffic mitigation. So we have, though, in our matrix, the city is applying, again, we call it an arterial. Well, what's wrong with that is, from a complete street standpoint, you're jamming autocentric factor into something that's supposed to be holistic and more balanced. So you don't want to look at it from arterial and whatnot. You want to look at it from a more holistic and what they call a context design sensitive solutions for our traffic woes. Now turn to the next page, please, because what I'd like you to do if you want to do homework is go through the matrix, that 26-page matrix, and look at the fact that there are 247 ongoing, immediate, short-term, mid-term, long-term, and no time frame. And so what are some of the no time frame? In the natural environment, we have what would be important to me is our trees. And we have here it's called action item 1.5, adopt an urban forest management plan. Sounds great, right? So I look at where it's the implementation date. It's blank. Who's going to do it? It's blank. How much money is it? It's blank. Maybe it's something in process, which we need to know. But there are several of these plans that have been put in here. We know that the specific plan is going to be implemented immediately. But what about these that there are 34, that there are no time frames listed for them? What I'm looking for in the implementation chapter that isn't there is, how is the city going to prioritize this? And some of them you'll see are duplicative action items. Some of them have no business. I have to tell you, my least favorite is dealing with capping the 110 freeway to create more parks. Caltrans doesn't own it. I mean, Caltrans owns that piece. It's a landmark. It's going to cost millions, if not billions of dollars to cover the 110 as a park. It's been done in other cities. Do we want to be looking at that in a 20-year time frame? We shouldn't have to do that. So let me just finish up by saying, look at, and did I do it here? Look at the top part that I on the second page, on the flip side. When you see something, if you go through some of these action items of what the city is supposed to do, if you see words like address, consider, create, evaluate, look at the time frame and look at the particular action item. That means just study it. That doesn't mean that it's going to actually happen. So like for what I was talking about, for the infrastructure, which really I'm very concerned about, and I know I'm going over time, if I can just have a few more moments.
Just a couple more, because we really want people to
Sure.
be able to
Ask questions.
Yeah.
I know, but here's the deal. It sounds great. This is, and you can note this, this is for infrastructure. A 3.13a. Create a long-term plan to update infrastructure to not only accommodate growing population and businesses, but also the effects of climate change. This would include upgrading the water system to provide proper water pressure throughout the city, the sewer system to accommodate future increases in flow, as well as the storm drain, etc., etc. It's to create. They don't say anything here to adopt and implement. That's just means to prepare it. And that's in midterm, which would be somewhere 10 years from now. So when you look at these, are these viable action items, or are they make work that won't result in something that we can really say, here's what we need? What I would like to recommend in the implementation is basically a report card. Wouldn't you want to have that? Know what the priorities are, what the milestones and schedules are for each of the action items, and then once a year, go through not 247, but hopefully less than 100. That's doable, and that can be accomplished within the 20-year time frame that will benefit and strengthen our community sources, and have a report card and say which ones worked, which ones are still in progress, and why. Thank you.
So would you like to entertain some questions now? And
Well, I would, but I'd also like to encourage if anybody has 3 minutes worth of their own views to take a chance. Here, I'll just give this to you, Diana. They want people just to say.
Yeah, unfortunately, the city, although I agree with a lot of what Delane said, something that you must be aware of is that the city's ability to control its own destiny is under pretty severe assault by the legislature. As a result of a suite of bills that passed last year, the city now, under state law, is required to permit the construction of up to 3 units on each single-family zoned parcel. The main housing unit, an accessory dwelling unit, and a junior accessory dwelling unit. Furthermore, every 7 years, the city is required to develop a housing element plan. We are in the process of doing so. That process is supervised by Southern California Association of Governments. I've had the opportunity to attend some of those meetings. Notwithstanding the 500 units that were identified by the city as new housing, and I can tell you at the time that the city adopted the 500 units, we thought that we were being reasonable as well as trying to be forward-thinking. As a result of analysis undertaken by SCAG staff, and SCAG staff does, the housing element has to be done in accordance with the development of what's called a regional housing needs assessment. Staff determined that over this next 7 years, not 500, but 1,100 units should be built in the city. Unfortunately, the Regional Council, which is the governing body for SCAG, listened to a lot of arguments that were being made by some cities that are far more densely populated than ourselves, and quite frankly, where there's also a lot more jobs in not-bedroom communities such as ourselves. The SCAG Regional Council ultimately adopted a regional housing needs assessment for the city of South Pasadena of 2,100 units. There has also been state legislation. It was introduced last year. It didn't go anywhere, but I am very apprehensive that this is something that we will see because Governor Newsom has identified, and there's a lot of push by some developers. There's an identification of a need of 3.5 million units in the state over the next 5 years. So what I am saying is, while we will try to the maximum extent that we can to preserve the small town atmosphere of South Pasadena, I want you to recognize and to appreciate that our ability to do so is under assault by the state. And one of the things that you can do right now is, if you look in the news, Google SB 50, that is a bill that Senator Portantino held last year. He's chair of the Appropriations Committee. It's going to come back before the Appropriations Committee. It has to get out of that committee and be passed by the Senate if it's going to survive, but it would allow, it does a lot of bad things, but among others, it would allow the construction of 4 units on each single family parcel.
Thank you. I wanted just to say one more thing in response to that. With the South Pasadena feeling and the luxury that we have, single-family houses, it's what Diana said about SB 50 is true. But also recognize that things are changing, which is also a reason why we need to have a dialogue. And for example, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there is no longer single-family home dwellings as far as zoning. It's now opened up to 3 units per parcel. And there's a lot of questions about that. I'm not an expert, and I see lots of hands. But I just want you to know, as a community, we should be talking about this as we grow, and not just limited to the general plan, but to start an ongoing conversation so that we love all the great things about this place, but we talk about how this is going to affect us. I'm going to go around.
Hi, thank you. And as someone who's been in business in this community for years and a property owner, I'm questioning the 130,000 square feet of retail and how different that was from the original general plan. And
do you recall what it was?
I don't.
Okay, I don't.
But 130,000 square feet of retail. Most stores are 12.
What was that? What's like the big lots? Do you have a feeling?
No, but individual stores are about 1,200. So that is about 108 new stores. So I see a ghost town. We've had 2 stores from Blaze that haven't been rented in 2 years. We have 3 stores on Mission that haven't been rented. And I see no infrastructure in the city to accommodate this. We used to have a planning department that was open 5 days. Now it's 2 days. We used to have people that could give us permits for a new business. Now it's all outsourced and you can't get anybody on the phone. You go into the city, and it used to be if you had, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, I'm just speaking from firsthand knowledge. If I had it, I'm wrapping it up, a store to rent, I could take the person who wanted to rent it over to the city, see if it is permitted. Now I can't even get a packet on a piece of property without asking for it, and it takes me 10 days to get the same packet that I used to go into the city and then do it over the counter. So I don't think we have the infrastructure, and we need to be able to help the existing businesses.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And what's the story about Chewy's? And behind Blaze, it was going to be, it looked like Burgers I Am, and now it's not. So anybody here, as I see, okay, this is Ellen.
Just talk loud.
No, go ahead.
So in response to what Diana said, which is true, I mean, we are going to be forced to do a lot of things. That to me says it's really, really important to look at our infrastructure and to, as the budget comes out this next year, look at the budget and reassess it. to see that we are spending our money in the right places to help our infrastructure and maybe letting go of some of the things that sound good but we really don't need right now.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, there are a lot of action items affiliated with healthiness, like the city telling restaurants about how they should how they should serve healthy food. And I don't know if we want the city to be involved with that.
Hi, my name is Sheila Rossi. I live down the street. So I first became involved in the general plan and thinking about the general plan in 2010 when the school district was looking at redeveloping the lot here. And when I went to the city and said, okay, what's your involvement with this? And they said, well, we're not. It's part of a general plan. As long as it's in the general plan, we don't really care. I cared because it was public land, and they were saying that it was going to be, the school district was going to get tens of millions of dollars. Well, when you did net present value analysis on it, it was a $3 million fire sale. And that concerned me that we were going to give up a major property for $3 million. Thinking, because I guess our school district doesn't know how to do finance. So then it was like, okay, I can't complain and not get involved in the process for the 2017 general plan. So I attended the meetings, signed up to be on one of the community action groups, attended multiple community action groups in the charrettes. And a lot of what I was focusing on was, because I'm not anti-development, it was smart development, and how do we do it in a way the whole city has buy-in, so we're not fighting every time a development project comes in, and the development projects come up and we go, yeah, that actually fits the look, that fits what we've said, and we know that the city and the developers are considering traffic flows and how it impacts the rest of the environment. Because again, I live right on Fairview, we get a lot of the flow, and if the school district parking lot had put 90 units on it without thinking about traffic, without thinking about impact, it'd be a problem. It's already hard to get to our house sometimes with this little turnaround. And I know Delane was there, and I was there, and we pushed for the complete streets, we pushed for no fighting over Meridian versus Fremont and who's more important, but how does the traffic flow work for our entire city? And how can we make it better so that our kids actually can ride their bikes to school or walk without fear of getting hit by a car? You know, my son, who's 13, he learned how to actually ride his bike in the school district parking lot because we don't have a real park in this area. And that was one of the things that also came up in the general plan. I'm disappointed to look at the matrix and see that the parklet ideas or spaces and open spaces have all been taken out of areas outside of the downtown for consideration even. Because one of the things is that this area, when you look at, I'm really bad at my directions, southwest, so anything from Fair Oaks and Mission over, doesn't really have a park. All of the parks happen to be, you've got over on, gosh, I'm so bad, over on the Brandeau district. And then you've got Garfield Park, you've got Orange Grove, but Orange Grove is usually used as a field. Also, the community center has been taken out of the new general plan. And I don't know if you guys know that, it's now moved from something that was going to happen to something that will be considered and evaluated. No, it's true, and one of the things that really frustrated me about this process was after all of the time that people invested in 2017, all of a sudden in 2019, the new plan is provided, it is complicated, it is complex, and we weren't provided with the matrices until we demanded, said, hey, you need to have a comparison. That's what should have happened in November, and it should have been provided right away, I will let it go, but it should have been provided right away so that people could analyze what we said to what was changed without our input.
Especially considering they switched companies completely.
Right, that's, yeah, another thing. But let me, as you have questions, I do want to slip in things that I wasn't able to do. One of the action plans is to consider removing the fence around Orange Grove Park. Now, why? You have security, and you have, you know, the kids playing baseball, and you don't want the balls. Well, the consultants put down that they need to have more openness so more people can go in. This is an action item that is in that matrix. It should not be there. And also one other thing, I will get to everybody. That's right. No, I agree with you.
Very serious hazard.
But it's,
sorry, I lived here 50 years and the vents should be off.
You shouldn't be sorry. I respect that. I respect that. What I'm saying right now in the matrix, that measure is in there. Why? It's people who put together the measure that don't know our community. And one other thing, and then I'll go along, I'm sort of piecing in what I couldn't do before.
What it needs is parking for the Metrolink.
What is
So she's saying what they need is parking for the Metrolink, the Gold Line, more parking. But I've got to tell you one other thing, that those of you that live around this area, those of you that are location, it's really good. Well, as the developments grow, what they have is another action plan midterm when things get really bad, if there's a lot of retail that is successful, or there's a lot of restaurants and high-end stuff that most of us, I'm not gonna go, I'm gonna go to Big Lots and all these other things, and you know, I go to 99-cent store and whatnot. There's not gonna be those kind of places in downtown. It's gonna be high-end. But just so you know, that they will be considering a very specialized parking, a preferential parking district. They didn't say which streets, but they would be adjacent streets. It's not something that you all would request if you live in that area. It's just something that they would assign in midterm, so that may mean like 10 years from now, where they would cap each resident's household with allowing 2 permits per household on the street to allow the employees to also have the opportunity to park on your streets. Because for the developers, they may lessen the amount of parking requirements. So again, it's the locals that will be paying the cost for the new development. Don't kid yourself. Next.
Steve Rossi, also down the street. Just to follow up quickly on a comment that she was touching on, you know, the whole purpose of this presentation and the work that Delane has put in has basically been to deal with transparency in the general plan, trying to understand what changed from 2 years ago, something that we've been fighting for since this sudden rush after a 2-year delay to get this thing approved last year. And Delane fought to get at least a month of additional time to look at this stuff so we could have some level of community input. The thing that bothers me is that it's only been a week after 2 years that they finally put out a matrix of what has changed from the original general plan to this one. And we have city council members here, one of whom decided to take, after your presentation, the moment to stand up, and instead of actually addressing community input or addressing maybe allowing more time for people to review, it was fear-mongering about Gavin Newsom. And that's wholly inappropriate. What we choose to do here with our general plan is not because of SB 50, it's not because of some other legislation. If we have a problem with 500 units or 1,100 units or 2,100 units, that should be a debate that we have with the regulatory bodies about that issue. But we shouldn't be telling the community, oh, just approve the GP because we have, you know, AUD issues, or ADU issues, sorry.
Accessory dwelling units.
So let's actually.
Give another minute if you want to, Steve, you got another minute.
I think I made my point.
Okay. And who's the next one that wants to? Okay, Clarice.
I'm Clarice Knapp. I was part of the original general plan back in the 90s, and we had changed it from the 1963 general plan, which maxed out to 65,000 people, and we were absolutely appalled. Absolutely appalled. So we thought we'd gotten a little bit better, and now I'm sort of thinking we're going through the same kind of things. But I wanted to ask Diana, Laguna Beach, if you Google Laguna Beach in a recent article, they were saying they're maxed out. And I don't know whether they're just going to defy some of these regulations or whatever. I know they're Orange County instead of LA County, the scale's different, but somebody needs to research that. You or Dick should research that. Anyway, I thought it was interesting that they are saying no, no more.
Who's next? Oh, why don't you?
You just have to pass it on. Yeah.
Again, I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Brandon Fox. I live on Fremont Avenue, and one of our issues has been the traffic on Fremont Avenue, the danger of Fremont Avenue, which came to a head, as I mentioned this week, as all the issues combined. We have trucks on the street that aren't supposed to be there. We have motorcycles that go way too fast, lots of cars that go way too fast. Just this week, right outside of my house, a motorcycle decided it was going to pass a moving truck on the right, heading north on Fremont Avenue, hit the curb, hit the truck, died. That's what happened just this week. We've been raising these issues since I've been a resident for several years. I went back and have done some history, and 40 years ago, a judge allowed Pasadena to build the wishbone, which has caused all the traffic to come flowing down Fremont Avenue, said it was a temporary solution and that the city of South Pasadena 40 years ago could come up with fixes to the issues, and it's been 40 years and the city hasn't done anything. I'm now disappointed to look at the matrix, and I appreciate you pointing that out today because this was not something that was transparent before. The matrix has 0 action items related to Fremont Avenue, despite everybody knowing that this is the biggest traffic issue I think that we have in the city.
There is some reference, but it's not going to be implementable.
It talks about the neighborhood management NT, whatever it is. But
I think there is one, but as I said, it's not something that is going to be done immediately.
There are fixes that we could have to get trucks off the street, very simply, and we've raised that with the city, and we're going to continue to raise that with the city. It should be something that is specifically pointed out, because the trucks create noise, the trucks create danger, the trucks create 2 different cities, because we don't even know many of our Oak Lawn residents right across the street, because they can't cross the street. We can't cross the street.
That's the same thing for Meridian, too.
Okay. Exactly. So anyway, thank you, and I appreciate your support.
Who's next?
Before we continue, can I just ask all of you, we can extend this a few minutes past 11 o'clock if you like, but can you all just stay a little bit longer?
And if not.
Okay,
Yeah, if
great.
not, feel free
All right.
to leave. I won't.
That's what we'll do. Thank you.
Hi, Delane. My name is John Strabalis. I live on Linden Street, right behind the high school. I have a question for you. In terms of designating South Pass as a creative community, what data do we have that supports this as a way of economic development, of maintaining the character of the city that we desire so much, of have we polled community members to see if this is something that they want? Furthermore, have you polled creatives insofar as this designation could potentially lead to a situation such as you described in Venice, where we have a cost of living that goes through the roof? Have you polled creatives to see that this is something that they want done in their name?
All right, so I would like 3 minutes as well, because I didn't get that part of the presentation, so I appreciate that. So I am, again, not a city staff person, and one of my comments in this is that generally in these sorts of documents there is references, and to see where some of the statements that they're making has some valid, references, citations, and it's lacking in here. Maybe it'll come around in the final version, I don't know. Whether there was a poll, there have been a series of surveys that have been conducted, so I don't recall of any, so I don't want to say no, but I think if anybody else knows, they could say that. But what I wanted to say is this business of creative sector, it is a planning tool that is now extremely popular across the country, and it's called creative placemaking, and it's the intersection of the creative community, whatever that is defined as for each community, where it intersects with economic revitalization, and it's really very good in places like small towns and rural villages, especially those that are really have gone downhill, So, but for ours, we have such a wide range of talent here, and why would we want to gamble? Because these are trends, Who thought that in Michigan, with all those great cars, American cars, Detroit, was always going to be forever a huge metropolitan area, only to crumble in the 80s and 90s when Toyota and Datsun really took the steam? Or what about our aerospace industry in LA area, the region, how that faltered? So I think what the importance is there needs to be more studies in this area, but that a lot of times these pioneering local creatives tend to get crowded out by more successful and more powerful people over time. I'll give you just one more thing and then I'm going to go right back to the next person. But I have a reason to go over to Highland Park, and personal religious reasons. And that's my community there too. And there has been a resurgence of creative placemaking. So I'm telling you, this is not going to be just for South Pasadena. It's going to also be for a lot of communities. And so what's happened to Highland Park? What's happened to Boyle Heights and City Terrace? There's the local population who cannot afford all the upscale stuff that is now happening. It's not Mayberry RFD in Highland Park or in Boyle Heights, just so you know. Let's go ahead.
My name is Frank again. Delane, thank you very much. I've read, or I've tried to read a number of these plans over the years, and it's not easy. And this may be the best presentation I've ever heard, trying to distill a plan. Even I can understand it. It's a lot. My concern, Delane, isn't so much about the plan itself, but planning. And the way it's happened, maybe the way that it hasn't happened. And my experience and observation has been that a general plan is the type of thing that either a community can come up with, or the other type of a general plan is the type that's actually imposed on the community. And I'm starting to get the sense that with so many great minds involved in planning this plan 3 years ago, and I understand a consultant was changed in the middle of the plan. Which type of a plan is this? You're suggesting this used to be a community up process.
Yes,
but more
bottom up.
And
now it seems to be more top down.
And I personally have a problem with that, just per se, not even knowing the particulars of the plan. Because living in a town like this with so many capable people, whatever we decide is best for our present and our future and our kids, I'm fine with that just per se, because I know it's come out of our community process. But when it's done to us, and when I see people who were involved, and they're saying, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
This isn't what I was working on 3 years ago. Then my question is, what happened to our process? There's housing is an issue. The councilwoman has a particular point. There's always going to be, the politicians in Sacramento and their wisdom will, from time to time, put pressures on local government. They know best, apparently. But Diana, that's precisely when we need community planning the most, is when politicians listening to big developers tweak planning laws across the state, impose these strictures on us. This is exactly when we need to come together and take our planning process back. And I'm just wondering, what happened to the process, and where are we now, other than apparently backs against the wall with a deadline?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Linda Krause, and I live at 1109 Revelia Street. I used to be a Caltrans tenant. Now I'm a Caltrans, ex-Caltrans homeowner. I'm very happy for that. So now I have a lot more stake. But my observations of what's been happening in a lot of the communities that you have mentioned, how upscale they've become, is that really what happens when you're talking about, I think it was 500 residential units down by Huntington.
Well, everything. That's what they're proposing.
There was a big move for Huntington and Fremont, that area.
Commercial mostly, but yeah.
Commercial, okay. Well, wherever there's residential and commercial only that are pushed by developers, what I have seen in Los Angeles and these other communities that you have mentioned is that the low-cost housing or normal average cost of housing, those houses, those buildings are destroyed, put in this new residential and new commercial buildings, and that the residential units are then higher class, more expensive, and they've moved out the local population. So that's very much what could happen in South Pasadena. And what I see happening with this creative, emphasis and everything is that we're going to have a lot of shops that are going to be way above the affordability of most people in South Pasadena, or many people, because the majority of people in South Pasadena are of senior age. And I just wonder, with all this emphasis on development and on the developers, how many of us are going to be run out because it's going to be too expensive to live in this area.
Yes. Can I just, okay, one statement, and I'm going to give it back to Anne. So we were at an intimate party for New Year's, and made small talk with a couple that we hadn't met before. And, when you meet somebody, where are you from and whatnot? And I said, we live in South Pasadena. And the lady said, oh, I grew up in South Pasadena, which was a nice change of pace instead of saying, oh yeah, I like the Rose Parade, because people don't always hear that. So I said, oh, where did you live? And she said, on Brent in a beautiful old Craftsman house. We raised our kids there. And I said, oh, you don't live there anymore? No, it got too expensive. We had to move out. And I said, well, where do you live now? And she said, without a beat, she said, I live in Sierra Madre. I really love it. It reminds me of what once South Pasadena was. And I went like, oh, that hurt. But I mean, that's why I'm saying the affordability is already here, and we have to figure out how creative we can be. I'll just pass this to Anne, but I wanted to tell you that with the Journal of the American Planning Association, and I can give this link to Betty, but it's titled, it was a Toronto study, but it's a peer-reviewed journal, as I said, the American Planning Association, and it's entitled, in 2018, Planning for Mixed Use, Affordable for Whom? And it clearly shows exactly what you stated about how it pushes out people. Let me get to Anne and not waste any of your time, because we are past.
Shelley.
Ann Bagasau. John and I were going to do a brief presentation on the affordability section of the plan, but in the interest of time and out of respect of Delane's efforts to prepare this presentation, we decided to forgo. But, so thank you for bringing up part of our presentation. But it's a perfect time for me to mention, following up with what Mr. Cardenas said and what Linda said, and something that you said about we need our baristas, we need our retail people, we need our cleaning people. Those are very low-wage jobs. So, and then again, going back to all of this emphasis when you look at the matrix about attract the creatives, attract the creatives, attract the creatives, you also can look at the matrix and see that there's two interesting things under, I think it was resilient affordability, which John and I aren't really sure why they're in affordability, but now when we're looking at everything as a big picture, it sort of makes sense and now is a concern for me. One of the things that was removed, which I'm assuming was there because of the community input from 2017, is support the community social structure and economic livelihood of residents. That's been removed. Also removed, attract and retain business that provides high-wage, high-value jobs to local residents. Removed. So this is displacement that we're talking about. Why, with all this development and building and more office space and more retail space and more housing, have these two things been removed? And are we missing something where it's included on some other umbrella, like did the whole tree section get removed because now we have this one action plan for urban forestry? So it's just, where something sounds really lovely over here, if you read further into the matrix, there's something over here that counters that. And those are the things that were changed. So take a closer look, even in the places, because you'll see in the matrix where it says new, removed. Pay also attention to the things where language has been modified, because it might just be one or two words that really changes the intent of what was placed there based on based on the community input from 2017. But one of our questions is going to be to the city when John and I submit our comments, or some of the contradictory things buried in other sections of the plan that contradict the plan for affordability. Not everything in the affordability section is bad, but that's because it responds to the baseline mandates for the state. It's not because we came up with anything intentionally awesome and creative.
So yeah, so I don't know about what it meant, and I didn't answer John's question about what it meant to have a resolution or an appointment of creative community. But I figured maybe that's a branding kind of thing, but I don't know what that leads to, whether it emphasizes one group over another and provides incentives for that at the disadvantage of the others. I don't know. It may be very innocent. But for me, again, it separates us and further segregates the class of incomes and the people who have and the people who have not. I have nothing but respect for everybody, no matter how much wealth or how little wealth you have. I grew up working class, and I worked my way through college. I was fortunate to get scholarships, but you know, everybody matters, and everybody has a point of view that we can't always agree on. But the creatives, I respect them, but I'm concerned that there will be too much emphasis of that and not others.
One more question and then we need to wrap this
How
up.
about two, Shelley?
Two? Okay. Sorry, two questions and we'll wrap it up. Sorry, three. Make it less than 3 minutes.
And I won't say anything further.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jerry Lynn Chun, and I live up in Monterey Hills. And my question is, what can we do besides just writing our comments? Because we had the, bottom up in 2017, and it almost seems purposeful that now this big rush in the 2019 plan is being rushed, kind of shoved down our throats, and it seems it's very much more developer driven, and and also the fact that the company that I felt very comfortable with, and I'm kind of like, they get it. They know what we're talking about, that's fine. And then they were fired or let go, or I'm not sure exactly how that went down, but the city's not being very transparent about that.
And I would like to know.
Yeah, so that, I'm trying to figure out why that company was let go and this new company, and the planning department's been all turned around. Like you said, there's lots of institutional information. How do we as a city, as residents, besides just putting in our comments, how do we make these changes and let them know that this is, we're really uncomfortable with it?
Okay, real quick, is through social media, going to planning commission meetings and city council meetings and airing it. But the problem I have is you have your 3 minutes, you tell your spiel, and then where does it go? We really need, like Betty said, some open forums where nobody's controlling it, but we spend a few hours and have a particular topic and we just hammer it out. And if we have to have a red line copy of going through each action item or each policy to make it work, I'm willing to roll up my sleeves. I think many of you are. So all I'm saying...
Is the city willing to do that? At this point, I
Well,
don't think...
we'll get a rebuttal.
We'll get a rebuttal.
It's just information.
And we're the city.
Yeah.
Everybody here is the city.
Well,
Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, before you leave today, Delane, could you give us some real detailed information on what the timeline is? And that was going to be my question, what we need to do as a group to get our feelings across. But a couple of things in your presentation really jumped out at me. And one of them was with 130,000 square feet of retail plan for the downtown. That's absurd.
Well, it's in three areas.
Still. And what I'm afraid of is that the downtown character will be lost. We'll get a lot of chains in, chains for fast food and all kinds of things like that. It's kind of already in the works. So I'm really concerned about that, the character of the downtown area. And number two, the other thing that really jumped out at me was infrastructure. Oh my gosh. The water level in my house, the water pressure is very poor. Very, very poor on Linden Street. And also, the surface of my street on our block is so uneven, it's so patched, it's so bumpy, and right around the corner on Glendon, one of the residents has put in his own speed bumps because cars were going down there so fast. And so there's huge bumps in the street. They were not professionally done by him. So this infrastructure problem is huge. And how are we going to get all these additional units in without doing some real deep work and really looking at that in whole? You know, really looking at it not as a here and now thing, but as a long range thing. And I guess I want to leave here today with some real walking orders. I want to know what I need to do.
Well, I mean, I'm not your captain or whatever. I'm saying use my second page where there's verbs, you know, and the verbs are translated into, well, this is just a study, and then look at the implementation. It's a 20-year. So if it says short term, maybe it'll happen in 5 years, midterm, 10 years, and long term. But I'm just saying, when you read whatever it is, you can Google, you can do a search. You don't have to go page by page. If a particular word is in that matrix, you can do a search and find and see, and then read it. And it is connected to a policy in the general plan narrative itself, and you can go back and see where it came from. But what I would say is that verb really tells you how serious the city is in doing whatever it is. And like for the urban forest, maybe they left it off, but there's nothing there. So that's important to me as one of many things, as an example.
Wednesday.
Well,
Wednesday's the deadline for comments
for
to the
comments.
city.
But they will accept. Joanna has let us know that they will continuously accept comments as long as needed. But I've got to tell you now, as a former EIR consultant and government employee, when you do the environmental review analysis, you want a finite description and scope of your development or your plan, because you're looking at that and then you're analyzing it and saying your significant impacts are in traffic, in air, and here are the measures we are proposing to fix those or make them less. Okay, I'm simplifying it, but you get the point. How can I, or our EIR consultant, if I'm getting constantly new comments to change the plan, how can I do my analysis? And aren't I going to charge the city more money because you're making me do more work? To do that review, it's part of state law, at the end of February. So really, the kind of comments you need to say are now. And you need to, you know, there's a few of us that if you do stream it, I usually go to commission meetings, but you can recognize some of the people here that talk every time at the council. And, you know, it would help, it would really help to write out a little piece, say, here's my concern about the general plan, make sure it's under 3 minutes, don't ramble, read it if you have to, and I plan to do that, because I ramble, and then let them hear that, and then write it, and then talk amongst your church group, your social groups, your book groups, whatever, and start having something where we have an upwelling of opinions. Is the deadline to adopt it in, I think it's spring of 2020 or thereabouts? Is that hard and fast because this is a state-driven process, and this update is overdue? Is Is the deadline tied to a state mandate, a letter or something that, or a phone call? They said, South Pasadena, you're in big trouble. You should have had this done a while ago, and you better do it now, or else something will happen, whatever that or else. Is it that? Or is it simply, hey, we got a bunch of developers going on here, waiting in the wings, just waiting for you to do it? Now, I say this because I don't know. And I mean, when you don't have a knowledge base, you fill it in with whatever comes. And I know Diana and Dr. Schneider and all of the others, commissioners that are here, I know they're honest people. So I don't know what's going on, why the date of 2020 is firm, other than we're past due. If we could talk to the state, if it was state-driven, maybe we could all send our begging, you know, please, we're just really getting back into it.
Hold
on,
Just 1 second.
All right.
What you can do, everybody, is join WISPPA. It's really cheap, so we can have this community forum. No, seriously. Where council people can be here, commissioners can be here, people can be heard, and please put away your chairs when we can leave.
Okay, Harry, and then Diana. And then we're gonna finish this.
She might be asking my question. I just wanted to ask if one of the council members here would explain what happened to the 2017 process in vendor. We're all talking about it, and I was on that committee as well, and it just went away. So if they could explain what happened, and I could see changing vendors, but why would the plan change, you know?
Diana, your turn.
And can we close with Dr. Schneider?
Yeah, and Rick, maybe you can come up too. You're gonna let me take all the bows and arrows, huh? What happened, and I'm very concerned, Frank, about your perception, and to the extent that it may be shared by anyone, that this is top down and the city's saying this is what we want, because that's absolutely not the case. I can tell you what happened is that, quite frankly, our consultant ran out of money. At the time that we approved the contract, we didn't have a lot of money for it. The contract was stretched over a couple of years. And I was told, when I was talking to others about the cost of the contract, which was $500,000, I was told that is incredibly cheap. And what happened is that the consultant developed, he took it, as Delane mentioned, there were the various chapters, our prosperous community, our natural community, and all that. Those were developed into chapters. Those chapters were posted on, I think it was South Pasadena General Plan.org, or Plan South Pasadena, thank you very much. And so they were out there, they were available, and those chapters then became the basis of the matrix. Obviously, in order to develop the matrix, there had to be something that was compared to, and that was the basis. And so the initial consultant took the input that was received as a result of the various meetings as well as the charrettes, and that was developed then into an initial draft. I don't recall whether or not the initial draft was posted. I know council members were invited to meet with the consultant, and I know I did, and at the time, I recognized this needed a lot of work. What he prepared was not adequate. There were a lot of questions that I had, and then the consultant ran out of money. And unfortunately, what wasn't apparent before is that the consultant really didn't have a firm behind him, it was him. And he was, council granted some additional money. When it was obvious that he would have difficulty completing the plan, our city manager had worked with the firm Placeworks, which is very highly regarded within the planning community. It's a very large firm. They have a presence at the planning conferences. They were just there at the League of California Cities conference, and he was offered to work as a sub-consultant, and he said he was going to do that, and then he quit. And so it is very, believe me, I was the one on council that pushed the most to get this done. So I'm going to say I am the most frustrated that it has taken as long as it has. And is there a state law that requires that we do this right now? No, there are a lot of things. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things in play, as you heard me discuss, all of the different potential legislative changes that may occur, that may affect whatever we put in the general plan. But we can't stop while the legislature continues to do its thing. Well, one of the things, if you download the plan, it was released November 4th. So it's already been a couple of months.
Without any comparison, without the
holidays, and I think, you know, there are so many people that are frustrated because something that has been in the works for years, all of a sudden there was 6 weeks or 8 weeks to put this together, and there weren't any forum meetings. There's no, so it's not so much the deadline as the fact that there wasn't meetings after this was put out that allowed people to have some input. Because you had the initial meetings. The initial meetings basically told us what was happening, which were great. I went to them. But there were no subsequent meetings, and I think that's where the frustration is.
And it was explicitly said when asked what's changed, like, oh, only 2% of it's changed, and it's all just regulatory stuff. Nothing major, nothing important. And there was a refusal to put out a matrix until just a week ago.
Well, no, that's not true, because I did ask for that, and I was at one of the meetings, and there was an indication that the matrix would be brought out. But I don't think that...
But Diana, no matrix was put out until after the original deadline for comment.
Right, and there were 3 meetings, Diana, that were just, this is what a general plan is, this is what a specific plan is. Any question. Without any sort of side-by-side comparison, this is what the original general plan was, this is what our changes are, proposed changes, how do you guys feel about these proposed changes? Does it reflect the community's thoughts? And how do you even feel about the original general plan, but things that we got wrong? That's what didn't happen.
And it's the approach to this, the approach now has been black and white, very different than the approach the last time around in terms of the request for community.
He's coming toward you.
Well, generally at these kind of meetings, I don't say anything. I just sit in the back and try to listen and get ammunition for what I want to say to the council in closed session and in open session. And I think the tenor of the meeting is well established. I think I and Anna will try to get this extension. I think it's an internal problem. And there's so much emphasis in the community about more transparency, more explication, that I think we'll try and do that. So we're not here to fight with you. You know, we're here to learn from you, and you are the community, and I really appreciate it. So thank you and good night.
Listen to us and to be here on the firing line. We really do appreciate it.
Let me just point out, we can't extend this long though, because we do anticipate that there are developers that are coming. And the longer this is delayed, then we have the old... Well, no, they won't wait. They'll just use what we have. And that's... But we will ask for an extension. I will say the current schedule is to have the plan adopted in June, July, not April. So if we do grant an extension, it would push that out further. But we will suggest a forum. I say I haven't seen major changes in the plan. There's been a lot of stuff that's been moved around, but we will take back the strong request that we hear for an extension of time.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Now, before we adjourn, are there any announcements that anybody wants to make? Sherry?